But the story here is all about the Dingle Fair and where he learned, and this resonates with quite a lot of the stories I've got about the Dingle Fair, which I hope to include. The lads, it's gone from most people don't understand this. They set off from back to the west and from Lispole at 4 o'clock in the morning, pitch dark, with 10 animals into the Dingle Fair. They were generally met on the road back towards Bealtaine or out towards where the roundabout is by what they call jobbers. These were the Canahori or the buyers who offered them a derisory amount for their animals. Everything depended on them selling them 8 or 10 animals for the year. If they didn't sell, they had to go into the loud, into the book, and buy their stuff for the year, so they were in debt and pot, so they really had to sell. So the jobbers had always the high hand, and of course it happened all over, I suppose, in Scotland, God knows what. But anyway, so this is what they were met with. And then they stood after walking maybe 4 hours in from Ballyfelder with their cattle inside in the fair field. They stood there in the rain or the snow or whatever with their 8 cattle. In the meantime, the jobbers now had left their place and had gone into Binner's Hotel for their breakfast. It was all psychological warfare. They were trying to wear these guys down. These guys are still standing without a bite of food. Young lads, Maurice Brick, he was there at 11 years of age. I was talking his story as well. Standing over there, he sits in the fair field in the rain for 4 hours, and then they come back and they offer you again. But anyway, that was the story. Eventually they get the bargain. Of course, we all know here, how was the bargain concluded? What was the signal to conclude the bargain? It's spit in the hand. Michelle, did you see that, how the bargain was concluded? We'll come back to that later. There's an element to this story, all right? I'm not a good deal, right? So that is the story. But in this story that Maurice has given me to use anyway, it starts in America, goes to Ballyferriter over 70 years, goes back to America and back to Ballyferriter again. So it's a tweaks in between. And I hope I just got that. It's important to understand the context really. Here we go. Éanach an Bhain, the Dingle Fair. The alarm went off at 6 a.m. and I immediately extinguished it for fear of waking Mary Ellen and Eilish. Is that his daughter? Eilish. It was the day after Christmas, the day of the Ran and Gort the Dua, Ballyferriter, and I was heading for Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I had negotiated the sale of land for International Paper IP to the South Carolina Power Company, and it would add several $1 million to IP's year and earnings. That's why they asked me to take on this particular assignment. A quick look from the window was not encouraging. There was 5 or 6 inches of snow on the ground, but thankfully my driver, Dominic, arrived and assured me that with the chains he'd affixed to the wheels, it wouldn't be a bother, and off we went to the airport. All was well. My flight was at 9 a.m. and I headed comfortably for the plane. I boarded and the plane pulled out on the runway, and there we stood for 2 hours. I knew I'd miss a connecting flight from Charlotte to Myrtle Beach, and as with all closings, time is of the essence, and it set me wondering. Nan came into the bedroom and she said, it's time to get up, Maurice. I was going to accompany Dad to the Dingle Fair. We had 5 heifers, 2-year-olds, and we had a good track to walk the 10 miles to Dingle. We headed out at 4 a.m. and the heifers were as reluctant as myself starting out. We did fine till we came to Ballinavama, and there's a wee boreen there that goes to Gallerus, and off they went on a trot. I raced after them and turned them, and Dad was full of praise. Then we came to the long road, aptly named, and it's at the end of it I felt notice bach on me, a tendency to cavort, yes, brackets, We reached the fairground at 8 a.m. and picked our spot to await the jobbers, brackets, people who would buy and sell cattle. When the plane landed in Charlotte, yes, the connecting flight had left. So as they say, I was in a pickle. As we were coming into land, I noticed a hangar and several small planes, and I asked at the inquiries if they had a phone number, and luckily they had, and I called and explained to my dilemma. I asked if there could be hire a plane, and a pilot, of course, and they said it would cost $600. I said I had an IP credit card, and that did the trick. I was flying in a four-seater within 20 minutes and heading to Myrtle Beach. The pilot was a Vietnam veteran, and we chatted about the war. Once we banked to the right, and I looked straight down on land from the window. I had a minor conniption, and he promised not to do it again. He radioed ahead, and there was a car waiting on the runway, and I got to my destination on time. A jobber stopped by and surveyed our heifers. He said to Dad, "How much, boss?" And Dad said £20 each. Well, yeah, I know that. They're only worth £15. Dad responded, "There's plenty of cattle around for £15, so why don't you take off with yourself and buy them?" Then the jobber proceeded to examine the heifers, and shaking his head, he offered £16. And Dad emphatically said no. A man nearby, a friend of Dad's, joined the fray, and off they started again. My biggest fear was that if Dad held out, I'd have to walk the cattle back home again. Finally, Dad's friend said, "Why don't you split the difference?" And after a long, drawn-out pause, they settled on £18 each. They both spit in the palms and shook hands as a sign the monaga was made. They then negotiated the luck penny and a few pounds to the jobber for luck. I asked Dad, was he satisfied, and he said, "A bhorish, ní rásig súlachum ach le £8 agus fúras £8 agus Tom Sauce." I didn't expect £15 and I got £18, and I'm well satisfied. I arrived at the lawyer's office in Myrtle Beach on time and announced that I was there, ready, willing and able to close. The executives from South Carolina Power expressed dismay that I made it after hearing of the snowstorm in New York. I removed my papers and proceeded with the closing, and the man in charge announced that they had hit a snag. He announced that at a prior meeting of the company, he had been directed to exclude a right-of-way granted to IP, which would provide access to their other land in the area. I informed him that it was I who negotiated the agreement and that it was part of the contract. He asked me if I would accommodate the change, and I answered no. He asked if I would contact IP headquarters in New York, and I answered no. It was my contract, and I had negotiated, and I started to collect my papers, and I walked out the door. I walked a short distance down the street, and truthfully, I was beginning to sweat when I heard the footprints behind me asking me to return. I did, and we closed and kept the right-of-way. When they left, their attorney, whom I knew, asked how I would get to the airport, and I said I'd hire a taxi. He looked at me and said, "You mean you left here and walked out and you didn't have a car from the airport, Mr. Maurice?" I responded, "Yes." And he shook his head in dismay. He did offer to drive me to the airport, and he was still shaking his head when he drove away. Dominic, the helicopter man, was at the airport to meet me. He had a can of beer for me and asked how I made out. I told him I'd closed the deal, and he said, "Man, that MBA you got must have taught you all that, didn't it?" No, Dominic, I learned all that in the Dingle Fair.